Peace to the gods and the goddesses. I am Noble Kadim Hananiah Mishael, and I'm excited to share with y'all some information today as it pertains to the meaning of Black. What does it mean to be Black? Unbeknownst to many of our people who have been conditioned, Black doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not a skin color. It's not a people. It's not a nationality. There is no standing. You have no standing in law as a Black person. Because in law, a Black person is a dead person. And how do we know this? Let's take a look for a moment at the Dred Scott versus Sanford case. This was a landmark decision of the United States Supreme Court that held the U.S. Constitution did not extend American citizenship to people of Black African descent. And thus, they could not enjoy the rights and privileges the Constitution conferred upon American citizens. Now, you want to know what's so interesting about that? How are Black people not the original Americans? The definition of the word American, as a matter of fact, let me pull it up verbatim from American Heritage Dictionary. (1828). This right here. So what is the definition of American, right? Because somehow we could not enjoy the rights and privileges the Constitution conferred upon American citizens. Now notice, does it say U.S. citizens or American citizens? So now let's look up the definition of American, right? Let's make it make sense. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make it make sense. Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So American. What page is this? Oh, it doesn't even give us the page. American. It says pertaining to America. Then it goes on to say, well, that was the adjective, right? American, pertaining to America. Now the noun, right? The person, place, or thing. We're not persons, by the way, but we'll get into that later. A native of America originally applied to the Aboriginals. Or, you ready? Copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. So, where in that definition is quote unquote Black people excluded? It clearly applies to Black people, quote unquote Black people, doesn't it? Because Europeans aren't native to America, they come from Europe. They traveled here with Christopher Columbus when they found Northwest America, North America, the most farthest west. also known as Amexem al-Marak, Morocco, the old Morocco, not the new one. So you must also ask yourself, how are the Europeans today, the people of European descent today, claiming to be American citizens, right? How are they Americans when the term clearly doesn't apply to them? Now, what's something else we must also take into account? Aboriginals. So the term American applies to Aboriginals, right? So let's actually cross-reference. Oh shoot, what did I just do? Oh shoot. All right. What does Aboriginal wait? Well, let me just look right in the book because we can't trust Google's definitions, right? We got to go into some old definitions of these words, right? So what does Aboriginal mean? What does it mean to be Aboriginal? Because unbeknownst to Black people, quote unquote Black people, they didn't know that they were Aboriginal people of the land. It says an original, and this is the noun, right? An original or primitive inhabitant. It says the first settlers in a country are called Aboriginals, as the Celts in Europe and quote unquote Indians in America. Now, isn't it interesting how the rabbit hole gets deep? So, isn't it interesting how the term American applies to, it pertains to the Aboriginal people, the natives of America, or the copper colored races? Copper colored races. Who does that apply to? So the copper colored races clearly applies to indigenous, also known as autochthonous North Americans, right? Aboriginal Americans. And then you see how they have the American Indian. We are the quote unquote true original Indians. The reason why we are not, the reason why we do not subscribe to the classification of Indian is because Indian is a misnomer. It's a misnomer. We're not from India, right? We are Aboriginal Moors because that's our lawful name, right? The term Moor is in treaties. The term Black ain't in treaties. American is in treaties too, right? But we'll get deeper into that a little later. So copper colored race applies to the so-called Negro, the Black people, right? Also known as quote unquote Black Indians. So back to the subject matter of citizenship, right? So the US Constitution did not extend American citizenship to people of Black African descent. So this is also what we mean by Black people not having any rights or standing in law, because they don't even have the protections in the very foundational document that protects the citizens or subjects of this country called America. The country is not the United States. The country, or let me correct myself, America is the continent. The United States of America is the so-called country. But It's actually, in fact, a corporation. And how do we know that? Just to cross-reference once again, 26 USC 3002. Definitions. Let's go to the United States. What does the United States mean? Federal corporation. It's a corporation. It's not a country. Big difference. So now, rights and privileges, right? So your so-called not American citizens, the Europeans have obviously taken the title of becoming American citizens. And check this out. Christian black codes. This is why we're not black. We're not black because if we're black, we fall under these codes that are still in operation today, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So the black codes, if you want to continue claiming to be black, then these codes very much well apply to you. So check this out. Decrees the expulsion of the Jews from the colony. Make it imperative on masters to impart religious instruction to their slaves. Now, I also want to point something out in the Black's Law Dictionary, because in the Black's Law Dictionary, it identifies an employee as a servant, i.e. slave, and vice versa. Employer, you'll find out that it means master, right? Black's Law Dictionary is right over there if you guys want me to grab it. But yeah, let's continue. Permits the exercise of the Roman Catholic Creed only. Every other mode of worship is prohibited. So now you see how Christianity was forced upon the people, because every other mode of worship during that time was prohibited. Negroes, in which negro in Spanish means black, right? So black people, placed under the direction or supervision of any other person than a Catholic, are liable to confiscation. Sundays and holidays are to be strictly observed. All Negroes found at work on these days are to be confiscated. We forbid our white subjects of both sexes to marry with the blacks under penalty of being fined and subjected to some other arbitrary punishment. We forbid all curates, priests, or missionaries of our secular or regular clergy, and even our chaplains in our Navy, to sanction such marriages. We also forbid all our white subjects and even the manumitted or free-born blacks to live in a state of concubinage with slaves. Should there be any issue from this kind of intercourse, it is our will that the person so offending and the master of the slave should pay each fine of 300 livres. Should said issue be the result, bliss, of concubinage of the master, his slave, said master shall not only pay the fine, but be deprived of the slave and of the children, who shall be adjudged to the hospital of the locality. This is how they deprive our women of their right of birth in privacy, in holiness. You know, they force you to have your baby in the hospitals and force a birth certificate and other corporate contracts on your person. Adjudged to the hospital of the locality, and said slave shall be forever incapable of being set free. But shall this illicit intercourse have existed between a free black and his slave, when said slave, according to the forms prescribed by the church, Said slaves shall there be set free, and the children shall become free and legitimate. And in such a case, there shall be no application of the penalties mentioned in the present articles. They even go on to say, if the husband be a slave and the wife a free woman, it is our will that their children of whatever sex they be shall share the condition of their mother and be as free as she, notwithstanding the servitude of their father. And if the father be free and the mother a slave, then the children shall be slaves. This is a little off topic, but this article right here shows in plain sight that the matriarchy is what runs the government. The woman who gives birth to both sexes, she is the cornerstone to a lot of what's going on today. All of the genocide, all of the rape and the torture done to our women through times of slavery is still affecting us today. My message to the woman is to seek knowledge and understanding. Study, and show yourself approved. Because the woman is the first teacher. She's the first teacher. We go through 9 cycles, 9 months, 7 stages of development, I believe. 7 is a number of perfection. 9 is a number of perfection as well in birth. Starting a new cycle. 9, 10, 1. Starting over, right? It's our woman who's going to help us really change things around. So this is why I'm exposing this information, because our women need to understand their status, right? Your status in law dictates everything. And we'll get more into status and how it goes hand in hand with rights, right? And privileges. Because if you don't have status, if you're dead in the eyes of the law, i.e. civil et mortuus, then you have no status. You have no standing in law. Right? What is your standing, state, or condition? What is your mental condition? Most of Black people's mental condition is, oh, we're Black people. We came here on boats from Africa, and that's it. Right? The European took over, and now we're pretty much in subjugation. Right? We've been overthrown from being rulers of the planet for so long. And this is documented facts. Right? So the US Constitution was mentioned in this case, right? And American citizenship was also mentioned. Now, we went over briefly the Black codes and why we are not Black. Because when you claim to be such, in Article 22, before I even click off, it's just so crazy that I just happened to land right on it, right? So Article 22, we declare that slaves have no right of any kind of property, but that all that they acquire, either by their own industry or by the ability of others or by any other means or title, whatever, shall be the full property, but that all that they acquire, either by their own industry or by the ability of others, or by any other means or title, whatever shall be the full property of their masters. And the children of said slaves, their fathers, mothers, their kindred, or other relation, either free or slave, shall have no pretensions or claim thereto. Because if you don't have the status of a living human being, to where now international human rights laws can now apply to you, how can you be afforded such protections under international human rights law when you are claiming to be not even a part of the human family? There is no there is let's just take for example, and I like to always use this example, right? So they say we're from Africa, right? But ask an African, quote unquote, what their nationality is. They'll tell you what their nationality is. They'll be like they're either Nigerian, Ghanaian, Somalian, Angolian, uh, Senegalese, Moroccan, Egyptian, right? You go to China or, in those areas, uh, Asian, Japanese, Filipino, right? But when you ask quote unquote black people what's their citizenship, what their nationality is, they tell you they're African American. When you can't be from two continents. What you mean to say is I'm Aboriginal and Indigenous to the land or to the lands. Because to be quite honest with you, your blood, your ancestors' blood extends so far that, and this is documented, our people's bloodline, our dominion, our inhabitation encompassed damn near 3/4 of the entire earth. We basically we are the true heirs of the land. But we can't be heir if we're black, because blacks can inherit nothing in allodium without any encumbrance whatsoever. No type of secret lien or tax or fee, right? Free and clear, right? Our people who are continuously claiming to be black don't realize that they can't own property without fee, without the feudal lord exercising lordship over their property, right? And this is not limited to even owning our bodies, owning our minds, owning our souls. You see, a lot of us think we have to become a part of the Illuminati to sell our souls, but the truth is the souls have been sold at birth when they placed your souls, your feet, on the birth record, right? And gave you a copy while they kept the original, right? A black and white copy to show you that you're dead. You have no standing. You have no state. You have no right of estate because your blood has been corrupted over time through legislation, if you will, lawmaking, right? So, um, so, so I hope this is starting to make sense. We're going to cross-reference to some other stuff. The U.S. Constitution. Why is the Constitution important? Because again, this is where the rights and privileges are afforded or are protected for the American citizens. And their heirs. So the Constitution is important because it sets the stage and it puts public servants and public officials in their place, right? Let's just take, for example, Article 6. Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the Constitution under this, as valid against the United States, I'm sorry, under this Constitution, as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state, not just some, all of them, shall be bound thereby, binded. And anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. And this is what Black people are, notwithstanding, because you have to correct your status in law. You are presumed dead until you claim to be alive with, which will now give you in full life status with inheritable blood, right? Inheritable blood. Remember, they corrupted your blood by denationalizing you, taking away your titles of nobility, and giving you Black, Negro, African American, Indian, all of these misnomers, which doesn't apply to no people, because they're all fictions in law or fictions of law, colorable, artificial. They appear to be real, but they are in fact artificial. So inheritable blood. Oh, let's check it out here. Blood which has the purity, freedom from attainder, and legitimacy necessary to give its possessor the character of a lawful heir. That which is capable of being the medium for the transmission of an inheritance. Right? So are Black people free from attainder? That's the question. My skin ain't black, I'm brown. I'm copper toned. What about you? My hair looks probably the closest thing to black, but guess what? It's actually still dark brown. Right? So attainder, very key, because our people have been attainted. We have been stained. We have been blackened. As a matter of fact, I got a draw for that Black's Law Dictionary, man, because it's crucial that we enter and understand these words, these spells, because it's spells that are being casted, right? And we have to break the spells, we have to break the curses in order to become free from what? Bondage, sin, because they got bonds, right? They got contracts that are binding us to the feast, right? Which is the feudal law, right? Feuds between lords, right? Because you're the true landlord, right? But they came here, killed all our ancestors, killed our people, committed genocide, and took our land and became landlords of our land. When Christopher Columbus came on his navigation with the help of the Moors, when he came here and found us, so-called black people. So let's find this a tainted word, right? Because again, we have been stained, blackened, weakened, all types of stuff, man. And it's time for us to rise in power, in truth, and righteousness. But we can't do that without knowledge of self. So what is attainder, y'all? What is attainder? That extinction of civil rights and capacities, which takes place whenever a person who has committed treason, that's what they're saying you're doing, committing treason, because they're saying you're going against your own blood. You're going against your own ancestors because you're not honoring their name. You're not honoring their titles of nobility, right? Because your ancestors were noble people. Well, I guess I can't speak for everybody's ancestors, but most of our ancestors as quote unquote black people were noble people. Kings and quote unquote queens, right? We were nobles, we were chiefs, right? So what happened? We got attainted, right? Our civil right, we lost our quote unquote civil rights. But even before that, we lost our human rights because we became property. We became animals. We became animals. How do I know? Because in the agricultural code, they clearly tell you the definition of an animal. An animal means all vertebrate and invertebrate species, including but not limited to man. And don't think that excludes woman for 1 second. Because man comes from womb man, right? Man comes from the womb, right? Womb man. So that extinction of civil rights and capacities, which takes place whenever a person who has committed treason or felony receives sentence of death for his crime. Now check this out, y'all. Black people have become legally dead in law. We technically already got sentenced, right? Until we came back from the dead, until we rose from the dead and captured our vessel, right? Which is our estate, right? Because we need a vessel for the estate to move around, right? So we have to come back alive and capture the vessel because we've been declared presumed dead and lost at sea, my friends. So we've become civiliter mortuus. Black people became civiliter mortuus because they refused to honor the names of their forefathers and foremothers, right? Civil death. So we lost our civil rights, right? So that means our civil rights are dead, right? Civiliter mortuus is the loss of all or almost all civil rights by a person due to a conviction for a felony or due to an act by the government of a country that results in the loss of civil rights. Dead in the view of the law, right? The condition of one who has lost his civil rights and capacities and is accounted dead in law. The effect of attainder upon such felon, in general terms, that all his estate, real and personal, is forfeited. So they're saying that we forfeited our rights. We abandoned our estates. We forfeited everything because we've become denationalized, right? And we've become naturalized US citizens, which is a foreign country, jurisdiction that doesn't even tie you to the land. It's a corporate construct under the 14th Amendment, which was actually never lawfully ratified. And we have the congressional records to prove it. Right? We have the congressional records to prove that the 14th Amendment is unconstitutional, is actually void ab initio from the very beginning. And it's a total fraud. And anybody claiming to be a 14th Amendment US citizen is actually consenting to fraud. Right? What does the 14th Amendment say? It clearly says that all persons, now you got to be careful of this word person, persons or person, because when they claim you to be a person, have you rebutted that claim? Because unbeknownst to you, a person in law can mean a corporation, a fictitious entity that needs a human living being to act on behalf of it, because that's what it is. It's an it, right? It's a thing, right? So essentially, they have classified us as things, as property, as animals, right? Animals don't have human rights, right? But it's so crazy how they will give a human more rights than even the actual humans. Don't believe me? Hurt an animal in the public and watch what happens to you. Watch how people respond, right? So all persons, they're saying you're a person that was born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction. Subject to the jurisdiction. Black people are subject to the jurisdiction because they haven't rebutted any presumption of them being a person born or naturalized in the United States. They're saying that you are within the United States, right? When you're anywhere and when you're in any of the states, they're telling you that you're within the United States or the state of whatever state. All the states are a part of the United States, right? They're all instrumentalities, right? They're all instrumentalities of the United States. So, 14th Amendment, again, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States. You notice how it doesn't say American citizens of the United States? Why? Are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So, the 14th Amendment, again, is unconstitutional. And it's actually a danger to this country. Because what has happened is they have given artificial beings human rights and deprived us of human rights. Right? Now let's back our claim up, right? Because we're not just talking, right? We have documented proof via right here. Let's minimize this a little bit. So, congressional record Proceedings and debates of the 90th Congress, first session. Now, one moment. Now, briefly, 14th Amendment, equal protection tool or tool of usurpation, and that's what it is. Mr. Speaker, arrogantly ignoring clear-cut expressions in the Constitution of the United States, the declared intent of its drafters notwithstanding, our unelected federal judges read out prohibitions of the Constitution of the United States by adopting the fuzzy haze of the 14th Amendment to legislate their personal ideas, prejudices, theories, guilt complexes, aims, and whims. Through the cooperation of intellectual educators, we have subjected ourselves to accept destructive use and meaning of words and phrases, not limited to what we discussed earlier, right? We blindly accept new meanings and changed values to alter our traditional thoughts. We have tolerantly permitted to habitual misuse of words to serve as a vehicle to abandon our foundations and goals. Thus, the present use and expansion of the 14th Amendment is a sham, serving as a crutch and hoodwink to precipitate a quasi-legal approach for overthrow of the tender balances and protections of limitation found in the Constitution. But interestingly enough, the 14th Amendment, whether ratified or not, was but the expression of emotional outpouring of public sentiment following the war between the states. Its obvious purpose and intent was to free human beings from ownership as chattel by other humans. Its aim was no more than to free the slaves. As our politically appointed federal judiciary proceeds down their chosen path of chaotic departure from the people's government, by substituting their personal law, rationalized under the 14th Amendment, their actions and verbiage brand them and their team as secessionists, rebels with pens instead of guns, seeking to divide our union. Now you know what's going on. They must be stopped. Public opinion must be aroused. The union must and shall be preserved. Okay? So, whereas the purported 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution was never lawfully adopted in accordance with the requirements of the United States Constitution, because 11 states of the Union were deprived of their equal suffrage in the Senate in violation of Article 5, when 11 southern states, including Louisiana, were excluded from deliberation and decision in the adoption of the joint resolution proposing said 14th Amendment. Said resolution was not presented to the President of the United States in order that the same should take effect as required by Article 1, Section 7. The proposed amendment was not ratified by 3/4 of the states, but to the contrary, 15 states of the then 37 states of the Union rejected the proposed 14th Amendment so you see, I don't even need to go any further, but as you can see, the purported 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution is and should be held to be ineffective, invalid, null, void, and unconstitutional for the following reasons. So, why is this important? Because you have protections, my friend B, as Aboriginal Americans, Aboriginal American Moors, you have protections of the treaties that your forefathers and foremothers made with the European nations. And this brings us to public statutes at large of the United States of America. We're going to do a part 2 of this. And this is going over copious notes of the decisions of the courts of the United States. And I hope you guys are paying attention to this one. So this is together with and before I even do that, y'all, I have to get back to the attainder, because we have to understand that we have been attainted. And in order for us to have civil rights, human rights, treaty rights, constitutionally secured rights, we have to be in the proper standing in law as heirs to our ancestors' estate, right? So what else it says? It differs from conviction in that it is after judgment whereas conviction is upon the verdict of guilty. But before judgment pronounced and may be quashed upon some point of law reserved, or judgment may be arrested, the consequences of attainder are forfeiture of property and corruption of blood by confession, by verdict, and by or by process or outlawry. Okay, we have been outlawed. We have been outlawed. We have been placed outside of the law. So therefore, we don't have protections of the law. This is why our people get railroaded in these courts and they don't get justice because they're not accounted alive in law. They're not accounted alive in law. So they have every right to treat you like 3/5 of a person. You're not even a whole being in these people's eyes. You're just a legal fiction that exists on paper. So back to the treaties that our forefathers made with these European nations to protect us in our commerce and our navigation within our empire, our vast empire, which encompassed a good deal of the earth. Okay. So it shall be noted that no state without the consent of the United States and Congress assembled shall send any embassy to or receive any embassy from or enter into any confirmed agreement, alliance, or treaty with any king, prince, or state, nor shall any person holding any office of profit or trust under the United States or any of them, except of any present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatsoever from any king, prince, or foreign state. Now, I also we have to understand the violations. The people who are claiming to be judges, the people who are claiming to be police officers, the people who are claiming to be attorneys, the people who are claiming to be all these titles, they were never even supposed to be given these titles of any kind whatsoever from the United States Corporation, which is a foreign state. Why is it foreign? Because it's a foreign jurisdiction established under the emergency war powers. And it only includes the District of Columbia, the 10 square mile of the District of Columbia. The United States doesn't include all the states. It only includes the 10 square mile in Washington, D.C. Okay? So the United States is a foreign corporation. You understand? And they are enemies to the Republic. Okay? We got foreigners running our shit right now, instead of the people who established the law. Because they took us out the seats. They forced us out the seats. Because we helped to establish this republic. So, moving on further, let's talk about treaties, right? Again, in Article 6, it says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So, the obligation of a treaty, the supreme law of the land, must be admitted. It must be admitted. So what does it mean for you as a quote unquote Black person who don't know that you have treaty rights? It doesn't exist. In law, he who fails to assert his rights has none. So, must be admitted. The execution of the contract between the two nations is to be demanded from the it has to be demanded from the executive of each nation. But where a treaty affects the rights of parties litigating in court, the treaty as much binds those rights binds those rights, and is as much regarded by the Supreme Court as an act of Congress. Now you know, when it comes to your treaty rights, it has the power of Congress behind it. It's a federal matter automatically, and it supersedes the state jurisdiction. So this is the status you have, Black people, quote unquote. You have the power of Congress behind you, but you want to be chattel property. You refuse to claim your inheritance. Now, this ain't for the people, obviously, who've never heard of this. But if you've been studying this stuff and you can see the clear proof and evidence, and you refuse to claim your inheritance, then don't complain when they treat you like chattel property, right? Like an animal, you know? So the termination of a treaty, because they like to make it seem like, oh, the treaties are not in force or they're not in effect. The terminate, again, it must be demanded from the executive of each nation. So if you're not operating in the status of an executive, right, which would be a minister, a consul, or a judicial officer of some sort, right? The termination of a treaty by war does not divest rights of property already vested under it. Very key. Nor do treaties in general become extinguished ipso facto by war between the two governments. Oh, two governments. Why is that important? Because there is two governments in operation out in North America. Morocco. It's proof of it right on your quote unquote dollar bill. It's not a dollar bill, it's a Federal Reserve note. Right? You got two governments. You got their government and you got our government. Our government, however, is we're lacking. You see how the head of the pyramid ain't connected to the body? Because there's a mind-body disconnection. Right? The breath, which is the bridge between the mind and the body, we don't know how to breathe anymore. We don't know how to really tap into the spirit anymore, because spirit means breath, right? So moving on further, the two governments, those stipulating for a permanent arrangement of territorial and other national rights, are at most suspended during the war and revive at the peace unless they are waived by the parties, or new and repugnant stipulations are made. So you've waived your rights, right? You've waived your rights by being Black, by becoming Black, by consenting and agreeing to being Black, right? Yeah. So the treaty on the Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, the Treaty of Peace of 1783 operated as a repeal of all state laws previously enacted, inconsistent with its provisions. So once the treaty was became in full force and effect, when it took effect through the execution of the contract, it operated as a repeal of all state laws previously enacted that are inconsistent with its provisions. So if it's inconsistent with the provisions of the treaty, then it's null and void. Now, whenever a right grows out of or is protected by a treaty, it prevails against all laws or decisions of the courts of the states. And whoever may have the right under the treaty is protected. But if the person's title is not affected by the treaty, and title means a whole lot of stuff, man. Whole lot of stuff. We'll get into that in a little bit. Not affected by the treaty. If he claims nothing under the treaty, his title cannot be protected by it. His estate cannot be protected by it. And this is why we have to understand what title means, because title is everything. Title is 1/10 of the law, right? You got 9/10 of the law, which is possession, and then you got 1/10 of the law, which is title. So what does title mean and why is it important? Right? Title. It says the radical meaning of the word appears to be that of a mark, style, or designation, a distinctive appellation. A distinctive appellation. We have appellations. The name by which anything is known. Thus, in the law of persons, a title is an appellation of dignity or distinction. A name denotes the social rank of the person bearing it, as duke or count. So in legislation, the title of a statute is the heading or preliminary part, furnishing the name by which the act is individually known, etc., etc., etc. Let's go on down. It says title may become a subject of property. As one who has adopted a particular title for a newspaper or other business enterprise may, by long and prior user or by compliance with statutory provisions as to registration and notice, acquire a right to be protected in the exclusive use of it. So even your body, do you have title to your body? Why do you think they can just throw people in prison, come and kidnap you and all of that? Because you don't even have title to your body. They have the title because they have the birth record, which is souls on it. And you made no rebuttal whatsoever when you became age of majority. So what does that mean in law? It means you consent by acquiescence. Silence is acquiescence. So we'll pick up on a part 2 of this. I hope y'all enjoyed this quick little bill. And don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing these a lot more. I'm just getting started. I'm just now heating up. I'm going to be dropping a lot of bombs soon, man. Real talk. So stay tuned. Peace and love. And I'll see y'all soon.